Salutations. Welcome to the Perpetual Fire for Freedom, Jimmy's Examination. This painting was done by me, David Jackson, in oil, acrylic, and collage, and it was done on a 30 by 40 inch canvas back in September of 2024. So here in this first aspect that is closest to us, we have Jimmy, and I love calling him Jimmy for just familiarity purposes, right? I think that in painting him, I got closer to him and wanted to incorporate what his voice or how he would want to be presented, right? Um, and so I'll be jumping between saying that and also Mr. Baldwin with the utmost respect, right? But I wanted to tap into his personality and everything that he really embodied, right? As a black man, as a writer, as a creative. And so you have him kind of welcoming in the viewer in almost like a smug fashion, right? But still demonstrating a level of humility, wisdom, right? And this reference picture, it dates back to about 2007 when I first read Everybody's Protest novel, and of course his biography, when I was studying African American history and culture for a class during my undergrad at UConn. So what we see is we have very overt symbolism, right? So we have um, the mountains that's there. Of course, it's a nod to Go Tell It on the Mountain, such a powerful piece of literature. And then, of course, there's the church that's mounted up on top of the clouds up there, because Jimmy incorporated the not only just the spirit, right, the human spirit, but he incorporated the church, his background, his upbringing. Um, you know, being brought up, his stepfather was a preacher, and he would give sermons himself at a very tender age. And so I wanted to show that path that's there, that's winding there and it's coming down, and you have like the X symbolizing, no more when it comes to um, uh, uh, taking a stand against oppression, right? So you have this bloody X over the cotton. And then, of course, it represents the history, African American history. And Jimmy went on record as saying, I'm not going to abandon America. May have taken a hiatus or traveled the world to get out of here and escape at one point, and we'll talk about that later. But ultimately, this is his home because, uh, it's his dad's blood was in the soil, right, and our ancestors, and so that's what this symbolizes here. But contrasting this mountainous region and this very bright region with the other side is the streets, right? So over here, connected to the streets is something that Baldwin always demonstrated. He even mentioned how, he could be Medgar Evers, he could be Angela Davis, he could be Bobby Seale, right? Showing that, hey, you guys may herald me as a writer, but those revolutionaries there, you got to respect them as well, because they're actually taking to the streets, they're touching the people, and they're figuring out how we can get justice and how we can live civil amongst each other, right? So you have, of course, um, you have these street signs that again are over and not to Jimmy's books, right? Like If Beale Street Could Talk and No Name in the Street, the memoir. But there's also these subliminal messages. So you have the X that's stemming from the graffiti name of Malcolm X that's over the top, that's wrapped around that pole, and then above that you have in blue MLK, of course, symbolizing Dr. Martin Luther King's name and hence the crown that's there, who Jimmy also had relationships with, right? So, um, you know, he recognized that there was a shared oppression between the Algerians and African Americans. You know, when he traveled from the U.S. to Paris, he found that his new Harlem was the French quarters in Paris. And so he really, I think it fed his spirit while he was there and while he was writing. And if I draw your attention over to the house that's flipped upside down, and I talk about the imagery that's there, and the reason why I use this technique is to pile on the darkness that's here. Really, over on this right side, and not only in the corner but up above, there was a friend in the price of the ticket that described James Baldwin's writing as, you know, the way he would go about it is by layering like darkness, right? And then he would um, come at you and do like a blast of light, right? And so we'll talk about the primary blast up towards the top in a second, but just to draw your attention here, you know, fire was a plea to white and black people, right? Um, I'm not about to sit in a tower somewhere cultivating my talent, right? So, do you think you'll write anything without a message? Was a question that would be posed, and James' answer was like, no, I got to not just do writing for writing's sake, but I want to write with a purpose. I want to write is my vocation, right? I don't take it lightly, and I can't afford to take it lightly. As who I am, as a human being, as a black man, this is my duty. And so one of the things that he posed was, you know, when we talk about integration, is do you want to be integrated into a burning house, right? And he talked about just the the relationship between blacks and white, and how the white man created the world with niggas that he wants to see, right? And he often talks about, you know, the master that became less human than the slave, because the slave can fool the master, but the master cannot fool the slave. And how, you know, this world, this this society is flipped upside down, and we could be of it, but then at the same time we still got to do our best to make change somehow, some way. And so you have the sign that says welcome, and I specifically separated for a reason, because it's like a backhanded invite to say, yeah, you're welcome to come into this house, but you got to enter through the basement, or you got to enter in through the back door, which historically that's the way that literally anyone who is in bondage would have to come, if they were even dared invited on special occasions to come into, you know, the house. They would have to come in a very secretive manner, in a very incognito manner, right? It wasn't welcome right through the front door. And figuratively speaking, it's the same way when you're talking about one, integration, and two, any sort of collaboration that may occur. It was almost seen as a favor, right? And so, you know, it's flipped upside down. We have different um, different words that are attached to the house, like faith, hope, charity. Those are upside down on purpose, showing like the upside down privilege that's there, right? And then we have words like loneliness or blindness that's there in black writing, right? And it just shows the disparity and the disconnect between the two. And you know, it's perfectly purposefully done in black writing versus, you know, white outline, and they kind of overlay and overlap in different areas. And then if we look at that cage that's flipped upside down and crooked, really wanted to tap into Basquiat's style of just sheer honesty in a playful way. When we think about children and how they may share their truths, this is a way that I wanted to incorporate that, right? So to be very frank and very direct, but to do it with a innocent um, innocent style. That was my goal to convey that here. So, you know, the the skeletal scripts that came to mind when Baldwin asked, "Do I really want to be integrated into a burning house?" It led me to think about this cage, this imprisoned area, right? And think about society and how we're in it together, right? Black, white, Asian, uh, Hispanic, Latin, you know, indigenous, like who, whatever your creed, your background may be, um, we are going to look for like liberty. We're going to look for justice in our own ways, right? And we can do that, and we got to reach for the same goal, right? So I have that lifesaver that's down there that is part of the foundation of that cage, and so you have God that's written on there. And then on the inverse of that, you have dog, right? Which is, of course, the opposite. This is God spelled backwards. And then society is written again as a nod to Basquiat, and I specifically put so in red as a shortened version of same-o, right? It's the same-o stuff, right? In the society that is like wrapped around that cage. So like who's going to care about society in the way that is coming together? And um, the silhouettes that are reaching there in black and white, they're going for the church bells that are burdening the air. And so hopefully that, strikes a chord with you, because I really wanted to resonate into what he was depicting in his writing. And it will lead us to the next area, which is probably one of the most powerful, and it's that beam of light that we were referring to earlier. So Baldwin is eloquently and passively and casually just like letting off this beam of light, right? And so you have these hearts that are dancing because Jimmy, he wanted to be loved, and it was something that he found wasn't so popular, right? Um, he talks about um, a lot of different versions of love, and all art is kind of a confession, right? To vomit and anguish up, and so you have this beam that's eliciting this these honest truths that are just scorching into the air, and he wanted to layer this reality, but then also wanted to give a sense of hope, right? Didn't just want to be doom and gloom and despair. So in here, you also have his very stylish ring, of course, and it's reflecting off of that light. And then I want to just hone in on the reason why I incorporated this part, because at first I didn't really want to draw attention to where to James's identity, right? All too in your face, right? We know that he's a gay black man, but the rainbow symbol doesn't necessarily symbolize that. It goes on to be a double entendre, if you will, in this piece, because of the punchline that he had at the end of the fire next time, where he said, "God gave Noah the rainbow sign. No more water, fire next time." Right? And it was just one of the strongest ways to end a novel that I've read in my life. So here on the opposite side, and where you saw those flowers, we have like the cotton that was on that side, and those go into different clouds, but also circulate into the cigarette that Jimmy would you would constantly see him smoking in different interviews and different videos, right? So both they symbolize like the cotton plant, right? So it's the flowers of it, and then also the pain that it could be, that can come from it from picking it, right? And your hands would bleed, they would be coarse, etc. So this middle image, I actually asked my son which one I should go with. And so he ended up choosing this one because he's deep in thought. He's thinking about his circumstances, other people's circumstances, and how he can lend his voice for what's out here in the world. And so I also wanted to make it a point to incorporate Plaza de la Bastilla because it's where Jimmy brought a group of interviewers to and some friends when he was trying to explain what he was doing with his writing and having his own revolution, right? And sparking that idea of it, and how it's never okay for a black person to be so straightforward like that, and that's not as it's not as accepted as if somebody else were to do it, right? And so instead of going over to maybe the Eiffel Tower, so he brought it to, you know, the first landmark of the French Revolution. And so you have you know, Place de Bastilla, and this is where he was speaking truth to power, right? And really got a little frustrated while he was talking about it because it seemed like people were missing the point. So I wanted to really make that I wanted to resurrect, and I purposely put it as you're looking up, not only for him, and that's the direction of the eyes, but for all of us as we're looking there, like, okay, if we concentrate and if we really want something and we want to work in union, this is what it looks like, and this is a landmark for that. Whereas I have the Eiffel Tower bending over and kind of melding as something that, yeah, it's a powerful symbol, and it's the 100-year anniversary of what the original structure stands for. You have the Eiffel Tower bending to the will of this one, and then you have the apartment complex coming up from the side of Jimmy too, which is actually researched as his home from back in the day. So that's what we have there, and then you have you know, the paper that's there on the left side. It has a lot of different notes on there. So like social terror, massacre. You know, I have on there because Jimmy felt like it was time to pay his dues, and it was the sentiments when leaving Paris, discussing, you know, the Algerian and black relationships. He recalled seeing photos of like Dorothy Counts, right, where integration was taking place, and there was a fury that he felt, shame, hatred, and pity all at the same time, and felt that someone should have been there to help her. So although he's seeping into his language and his tools as a writer, he still felt compelled to go and show solidarity with people back in the United States and with black folk that were going through this struggle in the civil rights movement. So then that brings us up here, right? So the commonalities discovered in his travels, they're 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 also coming to a head right here within the States. So because he's coming back to pay his dues, the stripes in the American flag are twofold, right? And that are also the silhouette of the United States. And so they're coming out there. The white aspects go into to form the notes that are written there, and it's like, you know, you got to earn your stripes. So not only as a writer, but then also in showing again solidarity with those that were marching, not only for not only the march on Washington that he participated in, but also the march with expats, right? And living one's truth is oftentimes closeted or hidden, as found in the dualities in American life. And so you have Giovanni's room that's opening up and revealing these dimensions that are cracked open to the American landscape. And on those stripes that are there, something I wanted to point out that Baldwin talked about the conversation with Bobby Kennedy, or the sentiments that he proposed, uh, that he met Kennedy's statements with some bitterness and some scorn, and he said, Bobby Kennedy only got here yesterday, and now he is already on his way to the presidency. We were here for 400 years, and now he tells us that maybe in 40 years, if you are good, we may let you become president. And so I have the 400 with the X over the top with the question marks around it, questioning this, the the arrogance that Mr. Kennedy had proposed there, right? And it was kind of a form of placism that Jimmy was picking up on. And I have it also, I have the 40 years, but also symbolizing 40 acres in the meal, right? These broken promises and these injustices that were established, and then there was never any sort of reconciliation, right? And speaking of which, you have the heart that's busted wide open and is empty there in the background and is torn within the heart of the nation, because Amiri Baraka said that Jimmy was the essentially the revolutionary mouthpiece, right? He was that voice for uh, for not only um, for black folk, but he said that Jimmy was God's black revolutionary mouth, right? And I think that it also held true for what a lot of people are feeling in the nation that can connect with this. And if you look at about the size of the heart, and you compare that to that figure that's in that figure of James that's right over there to the right, that's looking paranoid, he's tying up a heart, or he's holding on to dear life for it, right? He's securing it. And James felt that black folk essentially were the conscience of the nation, right? The nation can only go as high as black folks can go. So if we're going to lift up as a whole, then we need to come together this way and be tied and bound, right? And understand our struggle and hopefully come up with a solution together and jointly, and lead with compassion and love. And that paranoid look that he has on his face, it could symbolize dark clouds leaving or coming in, right? And he eloquently spoke about this fear, and people would have this misconception that James was looking to leave to go to Paris or Turkey or so, but in actuality, he was just running away from America because he felt that he was either going to kill somebody and go to jail, or that he was going to die in some form or fashion. And it stems back to his friend at a young age in his early 20s who jumped off of the George Washington Bridge and died by suicide. And he felt like he was next in some form or fashion. So you can see him guarded there, right? And tying up these boundaries to guard his heart and protect his soul and his humanity. And that's what we have there to wrap up, Jimmy's examination and the perpetual fire for freedom. I hope you get a lot out of it. I hope that you have time to meditate on what this imagery has provided, and hopefully it either reignites or extends your fire, or it sparks it. Thank you so very much for listening, for viewing, and hopefully for carrying this message on to and incorporating it in your life in order to make a difference in our world.